When your own daughter steals your identity to take out a $300,000 loan for her husband's failed business dreams, you face an impossible choice: protect your child or protect yourself. Sophia had forged my signature, used my credit, and put my retirement at risk. Also, Ryan could pretend to be a successful entrepreneur instead of the unemployed failure he really was. I spent weeks torn between maternal love and self-preservation, until I discovered they were planning to do the same thing to Ryan's elderly parents. That's when this mother decided it was time to teach her daughter about consequences. My name is Martinez, and I never imagined I'd be sitting here at 68 years old, telling you about how my own daughter orchestrated one of the most sophisticated identity theft schemes I've encountered in my 30-year career as a Federal Trade Commission fraud investigator. But here we are, and if you've ever trusted someone completely only to discover they were systematically destroying your financial future, you need to hear every detail of this story. I spent 3 decades building cases against con artists, analyzing forged documents, and interviewing victims whose lives had been shattered by financial fraud. I thought I understood every angle, every tactic, every red flag. What I never anticipated was that all my professional expertise would one day be turned against the person I loved most in the world, and that the criminal I'd been trained to catch would be sleeping in my daughter's bed. Sophia Maria Martinez Henderson. Even her hyphenated name should have been a warning sign. Was my pride and joy, my only child, the culmination of every dream I'd ever had about motherhood. Born when I was 36, after years of fertility struggles, she was quite literally a miracle baby. From the moment she took her first breath, I knew she was destined for greatness. And for 28 years, she lived up to every expectation. Valedictorian of her high school class, full scholarship to Harvard, magna cum laude graduation with a degree in political science, followed by Harvard Law School, where she graduated in the top 10% of her class. She passed the Massachusetts bar exam on her first attempt and landed a position at a prestigious Boston law firm specializing in corporate litigation. I remember the day she called to tell me about the job offer. "Mom," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement, "they're offering me $180,000 to start, plus bonuses. Can you believe it? Your little girl is going to be making more money than you ever did." I was so proud I cried. Not because of the money, but because she had achieved everything we'd worked for. All those nights helping her with homework, all those college application essays we'd revised together, all those law school loans I'd co-signed, it had all been worth it. For the first 2 years of her career, Sophia was everything I'd hoped she'd become. She worked long hours but loved her job. She dated occasionally but was focused on building her career. She called me every Sunday without fail, visited for holidays, and still sought my advice on everything from apartment hunting to investment strategies. Then she met Ryan Henderson. Still remember the first time she mentioned him. It was during one of our Sunday calls, about 3 years ago. "Mom, I've been seeing someone," she said, and there was something different in her voice. A breathless quality I'd never heard before. "Tell me about him," I said, settling into my favorite chair with a cup of tea, ready for what I assumed would be a typical update about another attorney or finance professional she'd met through work. "His name is Ryan, and Mom, he's incredible. He's an entrepreneur, a real visionary. He's working on this revolutionary technology that's going to change how small businesses manage their finances. He's already got investors interested, and he thinks he'll be able to launch within the year." Something in her tone, that breathless, almost worship-like quality, made me slightly uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. Sophia was 25 years old, a successful attorney, perfectly capable of making her own romantic decisions. "How did you meet him?" I asked. "At a networking event for young professionals. He was the keynote speaker, talking about innovation in fintech. Mom, you should have seen him up there. So confident, so passionate about his vision. Half the women in the room were staring at him." Red flag number 1, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Sophia had never been impressed by flashy men or smooth talkers. Throughout college and law school, she'd dated quietly intellectual types: future professors, research scientists, policy analysts. This sudden attraction to a charismatic public speaker was completely out of character. "What's his background?" I asked, falling back on my investigator instincts. He went to business school at Wharton, worked for a few consulting firms, then decided to strike out on his own. He's been developing this software for about 2 years now. The potential is incredible, Mom. He showed me some of the early prototypes, and I could barely understand how sophisticated it is. Red flag number 2, Sophia was brilliant with technology. She'd been coding since high school and had actually considered a double major in computer science before deciding to focus on pre-law. If she couldn't understand Ryan's supposed software, it was either genuinely revolutionary or complete nonsense. But I kept my concerns to myself. Sophia sounded happier than she had in months, and after 2 years of watching her work 60-hour weeks with little time for personal relationships, I was glad she'd found someone who excited her. Their relationship moved quickly, too quickly, I realize now. Within 3 months, Ryan had essentially moved into Sophia's apartment. Within 6 months, they were talking about marriage. Within 9 months, they were engaged. I met Ryan for the first time at their engagement party, a lavish affair held at one of Boston's most expensive restaurants. The moment I saw him, I understood Sophia's attraction. Ryan Henderson was undeniably handsome, tall, athletic, with dark hair, and the kind of smile that suggested he'd never met a problem he couldn't charm his way out of. He was impeccably dressed in what I later learned was a $2,000 suit, and he moved through the room with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his own success. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, taking my hand in both of his and looking me directly in the eyes. "I can't tell you how honored I am to meet you. Sophia talks about you constantly. She says you're the strongest woman she knows, and I can see where she gets it from. It was perfectly executed, respectful without being obsequious, complimentary without being excessive. And yet something about it felt rehearsed, like a speech he'd given before. "Please, call me Catherine," I said. "And congratulations. Sophia seems very happy." "She makes me want to be the best version of myself," he replied, and again, the words felt just slightly too polished, too perfect. Throughout the evening, I watched Ryan work the room. He had an anecdote for every guest, a business card for everyone who might be useful, and a way of making each person feel like they were the most important individual in the room. It was impressive, but it was also exhausting to watch. More concerning was how Sophia behaved around him. My confident, articulate daughter seemed to defer to him on everything, where they sat, what they ordered, even which stories she told about their relationship. When someone asked about her work, she deflected to Ryan's business ventures. When someone complimented her dress, she credited Ryan's excellent taste in helping her choose it. This wasn't the Sophia I'd raised. This was someone playing a role, and not very comfortably. But the most troubling moment came when Ryan's parents arrived. Barbara and William Henderson were clearly wealthy. Her jewelry was understated but expensive. His watch was a Rolex, and they moved with the casual confidence of people who'd never worried about money. They were also visibly older than I'd expected, probably in their early 70s. "Ryan's our miracle baby," Barbara explained when I commented on the age gap between Ryan and Sophia. "We'd given up hope of having children when I got pregnant. At 43. He's been the light of our lives ever since." William nodded, his chest puffing with pride. "We've supported every dream he's ever had. Business school, his consulting career, now this software venture. When you believe in someone the way we believe in Ryan, no investment is too big." The way he said investment made my investigator instincts tingle. But before I could ask any follow-up questions, Ryan had smoothly steered the conversation in another direction. The wedding took place 6 months later at an exclusive country club outside Boston. It was beautiful, elegant, and expensive, easily $80,000 worth of flowers, food, music, and photography. When I offered to contribute, Sophia waved me off. "Don't worry about it, Mom. Ryan's parents are covering everything. They insisted." I should have been relieved, but instead I felt slightly guilty. Was I being upstaged by Ryan's wealthy parents? Was Sophia embarrassed by my more modest financial situation? The reception was flawless, the kind of event featured in wedding magazines. Ryan gave a speech that brought tears to half the guests' eyes, talking about how Sophia had made him believe in himself and how their love was going to fuel his success. Sophia glowed with happiness, looking more beautiful than I'd ever seen her. For a few hours, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I'd been wrong to worry. Maybe Ryan really was the successful entrepreneur he appeared to be. Maybe my daughter had simply found her fairy tale ending. The problem started subtly, about 2 months after the wedding. Our Sunday phone calls became irregular. "Sorry, Mom, Ryan had a client dinner," or "We were at a networking event until late," or simply, "Things have been crazy with the business launch." Their visits home became less frequent and shorter. When they did come, Ryan dominated the conversation with updates about investor meetings and product development milestones that sounded impressive but somehow never resulted in any concrete progress. More noticeable were the changes in their lifestyle. Sophia had always been financially conservative, a trait she'd inherited from me. She drove a reliable used car, lived in a nice but modest apartment, and saved diligently. Suddenly, she and Ryan were living in a luxury high-rise in Back Bay, one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. "The rent must be astronomical," I commented during one visit, looking around their spacious apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. "It's an investment in Ryan's image," Sophia explained, but she didn't meet my eyes when she said it. When you're trying to attract serious investors, you need to look successful. Ryan emerged from the kitchen carrying 3 glasses of wine. Expensive wine, I noticed, nothing like the $12 bottles Sophia and I used to share during our mother-daughter evenings. "Catherine, you have to understand, in the technology startup world, perception is everything," he said, settling into what was clearly his favorite chair. "Investors want to back winners, and winners look like they're already winning." "But isn't that putting the cart before the horse?" I asked. "Shouldn't the success come first, then the lifestyle?" Ryan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's old school thinking. Today's entrepreneurs understand that you have to spend money to make money. Every dollar we invest in our image will come back tenfold when we close our Series A funding round." I didn't know what a Series A funding round was, but I knew what debt looked like, and I was starting to see signs of it everywhere. The expensive apartment, the designer clothes, the new Porsche Cayenne in the parking garage. None of it seemed sustainable on Sophia's lawyer salary, especially if Ryan's business wasn't generating income yet. But I kept my concerns to myself. Sophia was an adult, a highly educated professional who presumably understood her own financial situation better than I did. The first real warning sign came about 6 months after the wedding, during what should have been a routine conversation about holiday plans. "We might not be able to make it for Christmas this year, Mom," Sophia said during one of our increasingly infrequent phone calls. "Ryan's got some important meetings with potential investors, and we need to be available." "On Christmas?" I asked, surprised. "What kind of business meetings happen on Christmas?" "Big investors don't take breaks," Ryan called out from the background. "When someone wants to write you a 7-figure check, you make yourself available on their schedule, not yours." 7 figures. That was the first time I'd heard a specific number attached to Ryan's supposed business venture, and it struck me as oddly precise for someone who'd been talking in vague terms about substantial investment interest for months. "Maybe we could do something the weekend before," Sophia suggested, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. We ended up having Christmas dinner at a restaurant, just the 2 of us, because the investor meetings had apparently fallen through at the last minute. Sophia seemed distracted throughout the meal, checking her phone constantly and making excuses for Ryan's absence. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked. "You seem stressed." "Everything's fine," she said quickly. "Just busy with work. And Ryan's been under a lot of pressure with the business. It's harder than we expected to get investors on board." "What exactly is his product?" I asked. "You've mentioned financial software for small businesses, but I've never really understood what makes it special." Sophia's explanation was vague and full of buzzwords: blockchain integration, AI-powered analytics, cloud-based solutions. It sounded impressive, but it also sounded like someone who didn't really understand what they were talking about. "Have you seen it work?" I asked. "Well, it's still in development," she said. "Ryan shows me prototypes sometimes, but most of it is too technical for me to understand." That answer bothered me more than I could articulate at the time. Sophia wasn't just intelligent, she was technologically sophisticated. She'd been troubleshooting computer problems since high school and had seriously considered a career in software development. If Ryan's product was too technical for her to understand, It was either genuinely groundbreaking or complete fiction. Over the following months, the pattern continued. Canceled plans, last-minute changes, vague explanations about business developments that never seemed to materialize. More concerning were the subtle changes in Sophia herself. She'd lost weight, which made her look elegant but also fragile. She seemed anxious, checking her phone obsessively and jumping whenever it rang, and she'd begun deferring to Ryan on decisions that she'd always made independently. "Ryan thinks I should focus more on family law," she mentioned during one conversation. "Corporate litigation is demanding too much of my time, and he needs me to be more available for business functions." "But you love corporate litigation," I protested. "You worked so hard to get into that department." "I know, but Ryan's right. That it's not sustainable long-term. Not if we want to start a family soon." A family. That was new information, and it explained some of the changes I'd been noticing. But it also raised new concerns about their financial situation. How could they afford to have children if Ryan's business wasn't generating income and Sophia was planning to switch to a less lucrative area of law? The truth began to unravel on a Tuesday afternoon in March, exactly 14 months after Sophia's wedding. I was at home, reading in my favorite chair, when the phone rang. "Ms. Martinez? This is James Johnson from First National Bank. I'm calling to congratulate you on the approval of your business loan application. This is quite a substantial amount, $300,000, but your credit history is excellent and your collateral documentation is in order." For a moment, I thought it was a scam call. I received dozens of them every month, people claiming to be from banks or credit card companies, trying to trick elderly people into revealing personal information. "I'm sorry, but I haven't applied for any loan?" I said, preparing to hang up. "Ma'am, I have your application right here. It was submitted 3 weeks ago by your authorized representative, Sophia Henderson. The funds are being dispersed to Henderson Technology Solutions for business expansion purposes." My blood turned to ice. Henderson Technology Solutions. That had to be Ryan's company. And Sophia Henderson. My daughter had been using her married name on legal documents without my knowledge or consent. "Sir, I need to see those documents immediately." "When? Is your office open?" "We're open until 6 today, ma'am. Would you like me to prepare copies of the application materials for your review?" I was at the bank within an hour, my hands shaking as I reviewed the loan application. There was my signature, a perfect forgery of my distinctive handwriting, on documents claiming I was applying for a business loan to invest in my son-in-law's technology startup. The application listed my house as collateral, my retirement accounts as additional security, and my annual income as significantly higher than it actually was. Most damning was the section labeled Authorized Representative, where Sophia's name appeared with a notation that she had full financial power of attorney to act on my behalf. "When did I supposedly sign these documents?" I asked James Johnson. He consulted his computer screen. "According to our records, you came in person on March 2nd to sign the initial application, then returned on March 8th to provide additional documentation and finalize the approval." March 2nd and 8th. I checked my calendar. On both of those dates, I'd been at home, nowhere near the bank. Someone had been impersonating me, and given the quality of the signature forgery, it had to be someone with extensive access to my personal information and handwriting samples. "I'd like to see the security footage from those dates," I said. James Johnson looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm not authorized to show you that without a police investigation or court order. But if you're claiming this is fraudulent, I need to start the process to freeze the account and report this to our fraud department." I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I'd learned. My daughter, my brilliant, successful, beloved daughter, had stolen my identity to obtain a $300,000 loan for her husband's fake business. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a desperate mistake. This was a calculated crime that required planning, preparation, and a complete disregard for my financial security. That evening, I called Sophia. My hands were trembling as I dialed her number, and my voice was barely steady when she answered. "Mom, this is a nice surprise. How are you?" "Sophia, we need to talk. I received an interesting phone call from First National Bank today." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was small and frightened. "Mom, I can explain. It's not what you think. What I think is that you forged my signature on a $300,000 loan application and used my house as collateral without my knowledge or consent. Please tell me I'm wrong. Another long pause. Mom, please don't be angry. It's just temporary. Ryan's business is about to take off, and we needed some bridge funding to get through the final development phase. The investors are almost ready to commit, and then we'll pay back every penny with interest. Sophia, this is identity theft. This is fraud. These are federal crimes. No, Mom, it's not like that. We're family. This is just a family loan that got processed through official channels to help with the tax implications. Ryan's accountant said it was the smartest way to structure the investment. Even as she spoke, I could hear how rehearsed the explanation sounded, how carefully she'd been coached on what to say if I discovered the loan. This wasn't a panicked confession from someone who'd made a desperate mistake. This was damage control from someone who'd been prepared for this possibility. Sophia, you used my name, my credit, my house as collateral, all without my permission. That's not a family loan. That's theft. Mom, please don't talk like that. You're scaring me. Ryan just needs a little more time to close the investor deal. And then everything will be fine. You'll get your money back, plus interest. You might even want to invest more once you see how successful the company becomes. What company, Sophia? What does Ryan actually do for work? He's developing revolutionary financial software. I told you that. Have you seen this software? Have you seen him work on it? Have you met any of his clients or investors or business partners? The questions seemed to catch her off guard. Well, of course he works from home mostly, and a lot of the meetings are confidential because of intellectual property concerns. Sophia, I want you to think very carefully about your answer to this next question. Has Ryan ever shown you a working version of his software? Have you ever seen him actually do any work related to this supposed business? The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Mom, I need you to trust me. I know this looks bad, but Ryan is going to be incredibly successful. This software is going to revolutionize how small businesses manage their finances. The preliminary market research shows demand for exactly what he's building. She was deflecting, using buzzwords and vague promises instead of answering my direct questions. It was the kind of non-answer I'd heard from hundreds of fraud perpetrators during my career. Sophia, I'm going to ask you one more time. Have you ever seen Ryan's software actually work? Mom, you don't understand the technology sector. Most development happens behind the scenes, and that's not an answer. Mom, please, you have to trust me on this. Sophia, you stole my identity and put my home at risk. You've destroyed my trust. I need facts now, not promises. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Mom, I don't know what to do. Ryan says the software is almost ready, but there have been some technical setbacks, and the investors need to see more progress before they'll commit. We just need a little more time. How much time, Sophia? And how much more of my money? I don't know, Mom. I'm so scared. Everything is so complicated, and I don't understand all the business stuff. Ryan handles all of that. For the first time since discovering the loan, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my daughter. She sounded young and frightened and overwhelmed, more like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms than the confident attorney she'd become. But sympathy wasn't going to solve this problem or protect my financial future. Sophia, I want you and Ryan to come to my house tomorrow evening. We're going to sit down together and figure out exactly what's going on and how to fix it. Mom, I don't think Ryan will want to. I don't care what Ryan wants. You used my name to commit fraud, and now we're going to deal with the consequences together. The next evening, Sophia arrived alone. She looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. Where's Ryan? I asked. He had an important conference call with potential investors. He'll try to join us later if the call doesn't run too long. Even now, even facing the consequences of their crimes, Ryan was prioritizing his fictional business over dealing with the real crisis they'd created. Sophia, sit down. We need to have a very honest conversation about what's been happening. Over the next 3 hours, the true scope of their financial deception slowly emerged. The $300,000 loan was just the beginning. Sophia had also opened credit cards in my name, 5 different cards with a combined limit of $75,000, all of which were maxed out. She'd taken a second mortgage on my house for $50,000. She'd even found a way to withdraw money from my retirement accounts, claiming to be acting under a power of attorney that I'd never signed. In total, they'd stolen nearly $500,000 from me over the course of 18 months. How is this possible? I asked, trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal. How did you get access to all of my accounts? Ryan helped me, she said, not meeting my eyes. He knows about financial systems, and he showed me how to establish power of attorney for aging parents. He said it was normal for children to help their parents manage their finances as they got older. Sophia, I'm 68 years old, not 88. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own finances. I know, Mom. But Ryan said it was better to set these things up before they were needed, so there wouldn't be any delays if something happened to you. And you believed that authorizing yourself to access my accounts was legal? Ryan said it was a gray area, but that families did it all the time. He said as long as the money was being used for legitimate investments that would benefit everyone, it wasn't really stealing. I stared at my daughter, trying to understand how someone so intelligent could have been so thoroughly manipulated. But as I listened to her explain Ryan's reasoning, I began to see the sophisticated nature of his psychological manipulation. He'd positioned himself as the financial expert, the one who understood complex business and legal matters that were beyond Sophia's expertise. He'd normalized the fraud by claiming it was common practice among families. He'd justified it by promising massive returns that would benefit everyone involved. And he'd gradually escalated the crimes, starting with small amounts and building up to larger thefts as Sophia became more comfortable with the deception. It was a textbook case of how intelligent people could be drawn into criminal activity through manipulation, rationalization, and gradual desensitization. Sophia, where is the money now? Most of it went into the business. Ryan had to pay developers to work on the software, and there were legal fees for patent applications, and marketing research, and prototype development. Have you seen any of these developers? Have you met with the lawyers or the researchers? Ryan handles all the business relationships. He says it's better if I focus on my legal career and let him manage the technology side. Sophia, I think Ryan has been lying to both of us. I don't think there is a business. I think he's been using you to steal my money so he can maintain an expensive lifestyle without actually working. No, Mom, that's not true. Ryan is brilliant. He's just had some setbacks with the development timeline, but the software is real. I've seen parts of it. What parts? Well, he's shown me some screenshots of the user interface, and he's explained how the algorithms work. Screenshots? Sophia, anyone can create fake screenshots in about 10 minutes. Have you ever seen the software actually running? Have you ever seen it process real data or perform any of the functions Ryan claims it can do? The look on her face told me she was beginning to understand the truth, but she wasn't ready to accept it yet. Mom, you don't know Ryan like I do. He loves me. He wouldn't lie to me about something this important. Sophia, he's been lying to you about everything, and he's been using your love for him to turn you into a criminal. That's when she started crying, not the gentle tears she'd shed during our phone conversation, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Mom, what am I going to do? If you're right, if Ryan has been lying, then I've ruined everything. I've stolen from you. I've destroyed my career. I've thrown away my entire life for nothing. I moved to sit beside her on the couch, putting my arms around her the way I had when she was little, and the world seemed too big and scary to handle alone. Sophia, we're going to figure this out together. But first, I need you to tell me everything. Every lie Ryan has told, every crime you've committed, every dollar that's been stolen. I can't help you if I don't know the full scope of what we're dealing with. Over the next 2 hours, Sophia confessed to crimes I hadn't even suspected. She'd been filing false tax returns in my name to claim refunds based on fake business expenses. She'd been intercepting my mail to hide financial statements that would have revealed the fraudulent accounts. She'd even been gradually transferring money from my checking account in small amounts, hoping I wouldn't notice the pattern. The sophistication of their operation was staggering. They'd been systematic, patient, and careful to cover their tracks. If not for the bank calling about the large loan, they might have continued stealing from me for years. But as Sophia talked, I also began to see the psychological toll the deception had taken on her. She'd lost weight, developed insomnia, and become increasingly anxious as the lies became harder to maintain. She'd isolated herself from friends and colleagues, afraid that someone might ask questions she couldn't answer. She'd even stopped calling me as frequently, not out of lack of love, but out of guilt and fear. Ryan hadn't just been stealing my money, he'd been destroying my daughter's life, piece by piece, lie by lie. Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call in sick to work. Then you're going to come with me to meet with a lawyer and a private investigator. We're going to figure out exactly what Ryan has been doing, and we're going to make sure he faces consequences for what he's done to both of us. Mom, I can't. If this comes out, I'll lose my job. I'll be disbarred. I might go to prison. Sophia, you're already going to lose your job and potentially face criminal charges. The question is whether you're going to be a victim or a co-conspirator. If Ryan has been manipulating you, then you're a victim too. But if you continue to protect him and hide his crimes, then you become an equal partner in his fraud. But Mom, he's my husband. I love him. Sophia, he's been using your love to destroy your life and steal from your mother. That's not love. That's exploitation. She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her struggling to accept a truth that would shatter everything she'd believed about her marriage and her future. What do you think will happen to me? She finally asked. I don't know, sweetheart. But I promise you that I'll do everything in my power to protect you and help you rebuild your life. You made mistakes, but you're also a victim, and victims deserve help, not just punishment. The next morning, I called my former colleague at the FBI, Agent David Chen. David and I had worked together on several major fraud cases during my time at the FTC, and I knew he'd moved to the Bureau's white-collar crime unit after I retired. Catherine, it's good to hear from you. How's retirement treating you? Not as peacefully as I'd hoped, David. I need your help with a case. Professional or personal? Both. My daughter and her husband have been stealing from me, and I think it's part of a larger pattern that might involve other victims. David's tone became immediately serious. How much money are we talking about? Nearly $500,000 over 18 months. Identity theft, forged documents, unauthorized access to retirement accounts, fraudulent loans using my house as collateral. Jesus, Catherine, I'm sorry, do you have documentation? I'm gathering it now. But David, I think my daughter is more of a victim than a perpetrator. I think her husband has been manipulating her into committing these crimes. That's going to be up to a jury to decide, but we can certainly investigate that angle. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Bring everything you have. I spent the rest of the day with Sophia, reviewing financial records and preparing a comprehensive timeline of Ryan's deception. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Ryan was not just a failure as an entrepreneur, but a sophisticated con artist who had been targeting elderly victims through their adult children. That evening, Ryan finally came home. I was still at Sophia's apartment, and I watched him carefully as he walked through the door. He moved with his usual confidence, but when he saw me sitting at his dining table surrounded by financial documents, his mask slipped for just a moment. Catherine! What a surprise, I didn't know you were coming over tonight. Ryan, sit down, we need to talk about your business. Of course, I'd love to update you on our progress. We've had some exciting developments with the investor negotiations. Ryan, stop. I know there is no business. I know there are no investors. I know you've been using Sophia to steal nearly $500,000 from me to fund your lifestyle. Tomasao? Change in his demeanor was immediate and dramatic. The charming, confident entrepreneur disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. I don't know what Sophia has been telling you, but Sophia didn't tell me anything. The bank told me when they called to congratulate me on the $300,000 loan I never applied for. Ryan looked at Sophia, and I saw something pass between them. Not love or partnership, but fear and recrimination. Catherine, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was thinking you could steal from a retired fraud investigator without getting caught. For the first time since I'd known him, Ryan seemed at a loss for words. He looked around the expensive apartment, the apartment I'd unknowingly paid for, as if searching for an escape route. What do you want? He finally asked. I want the truth. All of it. And I want my money back. The money is invested in the business. I can't just liquidate everything overnight. Ryan, there is no business. There never was a business. You've been running a con game, using my daughter as your accomplice and my financial information as your target. That's when Sophia spoke up for the first time since Ryan had arrived home. Ryan, is that true? Is there really no software? Have you been lying to me this whole time? Ryan turned to her with an expression of pure contempt that revealed his true feelings more clearly than any confession could have. Sophia, you're being dramatic. Your mother is confused about how modern businesses operate. Don't you dare, I said, standing up from the table. Don't you dare try to gaslight my daughter after everything you've done. Catherine, I don't think you understand the pressure I've been under. The technology sector is incredibly competitive, and sometimes you have to make compromises to survive. The compromise you made was to become a criminal. I'm not a criminal. I'm an entrepreneur who's had some setbacks. You're a thief who's been stealing from elderly people. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to make sure the FBI understands exactly what kind of operation you've been running. The mention of the FBI had an immediate effect on Ryan. His face went pale, and he began looking around the apartment as if cataloging what he might need to pack quickly. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ryan, I can prove everything. I have 30 years of experience investigating financial fraud, and you've left a paper trail that a first-year criminology student could follow. Sophia won't testify against me. She's my wife. I looked at Sophia, who was staring at Ryan as if seeing him clearly for the first time. The man she'd married, the man she'd committed crimes for, was now treating her like a liability to be managed rather than a person he loved. Sophia, I said gently, you don't have to protect him anymore. But I'm in this too, Mom. I signed the documents. I accessed your accounts. I'm just as guilty as he is. No, sweetheart, you're not. You were manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit your love and trust. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it does make you a victim too. Ryan's expression hardened. Catherine, if you involve the FBI, Sophia will go to prison. Is that really what you want for your daughter? It was a threat disguised as concern, and it revealed just how calculating Ryan really was. Even now, facing exposure, he was trying to use my love for Sophia to protect himself. What I want, I said, is for both of you to face the consequences of your actions. But I also want to make sure that no other families go through what we've been through. What do you mean? Sophia asked. I mean that I don't think we're Ryan's only victims. I think he's done this before, and I think he'll do it again unless he's stopped. Over the next week, working with Agent Chen and a private investigator named Jake Morrison, we uncovered the true scope of Ryan's criminal operation. It was far more extensive and sophisticated than I'd imagined. Ryan Henderson was not his real name. He'd been born Ryan Michael Thompson in Cleveland, Ohio, and had a criminal record dating back to college, where he'd been expelled for running a fake tutoring service that charged students for help they never received. After college, he'd worked briefly for 2 different financial services companies before being fired from both for unauthorized access to client accounts. For the past 5 years, he'd been running variations of the same con: target successful, young women with family money, marry them quickly, then systematically drain their relatives' finances while maintaining the illusion of being a successful entrepreneur. Sophia was his 3rd wife. The first, Jennifer, had divorced him after discovering he'd stolen $80,000 from her parents to fund what he claimed was a real estate investment company. The second, Amanda, had actually gone to prison for 2 years after being convicted as his accomplice in a securities fraud scheme that netted over $200,000 from elderly investors. The pattern is always the same, Agent Chen explained during one of our investigative meetings. Ryan identifies women who are successful, educated, and close to their families. He presents himself as a successful entrepreneur with a big vision and exciting investment opportunities. He moves the relationship quickly to marriage, then begins gradually involving his new wife in criminal activities, usually starting with small compromises and building up to major fraud. But how does he choose his targets? I asked. He's systematic about it. He attends professional networking events, charity functions, alumni gatherings, places where he can meet women who fit his profile. He researches their backgrounds, their family situations, their financial circumstances. He's looking For women who have access to family money, but also have the skills to help him execute sophisticated financial crimes. Like Sophia's legal training, I said, understanding beginning to dawn. Exactly. Jennifer was an accountant who could help him manipulate financial records. Amanda was a bank employee who could access customer information. Sophia was a lawyer who could forge documents and navigate legal systems. The most disturbing discovery was that Ryan had been documenting his crimes, keeping detailed records of the amounts stolen, the methods used, and the psychological techniques that had been most effective with each victim. It was like a criminal's instruction manual, a systematic approach to destroying families through financial fraud. He's not just a con artist, Jake Morrison explained. He's a predator who studies his victims, identifies their weaknesses, and then exploits those weaknesses to maximum effect. But the investigation also revealed something that gave me hope for Sophia's future. In Ryan's notes about her, he'd written extensively about her resistance to certain criminal activities and her excessive guilt and anxiety about deceiving family members. He'd had to work much harder to manipulate Sophia than his previous wives, and he'd been growing frustrated with what he saw as her lack of commitment to their criminal enterprise. "Look at this entry from 6 months ago," Agent Chen said, showing me a printout from Ryan's computer files. He's complaining that Sophia is too emotionally attached to her mother and insufficiently focused on the financial opportunities. He's actually considering divorcing her and finding a more suitable partner for his next operation. Reading those words was like being stabbed in the heart, but it also confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. Sophia hadn't been an eager participant in Ryan's crimes. She'd been a reluctant victim who'd been gradually coerced into criminal activity through psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. The FBI raid on Ryan and Sophia's apartment took place on a Tuesday morning in April. I wasn't present for the actual arrest, but Agent Chen called me afterward to describe what had happened. "Ryan tried to run," he said. When the agents identified themselves, he bolted for the back door. He made it about 50 feet before they tackled him in the parking lot. Sophia, on the other hand, just sat down on the couch and started crying. She asked if she could call her mother. They found evidence of at least 6 other potential victims in Ryan's computer files. Elderly people whose adult children he'd been researching as possible targets for future cons. The FBI was able to contact all of them with warnings before Ryan could begin his manipulation process. They also found over $200,000 in cash hidden in various locations throughout the apartment, along with expensive jewelry, electronics, and other assets that Ryan had purchased with stolen money. Much of it was still in original packaging, as if he'd been accumulating luxury goods faster than he could use them. The strange thing, Agent Chen told me, was that Ryan seemed almost relieved when we arrested him. Like he'd been waiting for this moment and was glad it was finally over. Sophia's arrest was more complicated. The evidence of her participation in the crimes was overwhelming, but the evidence of Ryan's manipulation was equally clear. After extensive negotiations between her attorney, the prosecutor's office, and the FBI, she agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her cooperation was invaluable. She provided details about Ryan's methods that helped the FBI understand how he'd been able to manipulate multiple victims over several years. She turned over financial records, email communications, and audio recordings that she'd been secretly making toward the end of their marriage, when she'd begun to suspect that something was very wrong with their situation. I started recording our conversations about money, she explained during one of our visits while she was out on bail awaiting sentencing. I thought maybe if I could understand his business better, I could help him be more successful. But the more I listened to the recordings, the more I realized that nothing he was telling me made sense. He would say different things on different days, and when I asked him about the inconsistencies, he'd get angry and accuse me of not trusting him. The recordings were damning. In them, Ryan could be heard coaching Sophia on what to say to bank representatives, how to forge my signature more convincingly, and how to deflect questions about the source of their income. He was clearly the mastermind of the operation, while Sophia sounded increasingly uncomfortable and confused as the crimes escalated. The trial took place 8 months after their arrest. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery and watching my daughter face the consequences of her choices. It was one of the most difficult experiences of my life, but I felt I owed it to her to be there. Ryan's defense strategy was to blame everyone else. Sophia for being an overeager accomplice, me for being a controlling mother who drove her daughter to desperate measures, and even his previous wives for teaching him bad habits. He showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of the harm he'd caused, and no acceptance of responsibility for his actions. Sophia's testimony was heartbreaking. She described how Ryan had gradually isolated her from friends and family, convinced her that his business failures were temporary setbacks, and manipulated her into believing that stealing from me was actually a form of investment that would benefit everyone involved. "I know that what I did was wrong," she said, looking directly at me from the witness stand. "I know that I hurt the person who loved me most in the world, and I know that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. But I also want people to understand how someone like Ryan can make you believe that black is white, that wrong is right, that stealing from your own family is actually an act of love." The prosecutor was tough, but fair in his questioning, focusing on the facts of the crimes while acknowledging the psychological manipulation that had contributed to Sophia's participation. The defense attorney tried to portray her as an equal partner in Ryan's scheme, but the evidence clearly showed the power imbalance in their relationship and Ryan's systematic exploitation of her trust and love. When the verdicts were announced, Ryan was convicted on all counts: identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 8 years. Sophia was convicted of conspiracy and identity theft, but the judge acknowledged the mitigating circumstances of her case. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of early release after 18 months if she continued to cooperate with ongoing investigations and demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. The day Sophia was sentenced, I was allowed to speak with her briefly before she was taken into custody. She looked small and frightened in her orange jumpsuit, but there was also something different about her, a clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen since before she'd met Ryan. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said, gripping my hands tightly. "I know that's not enough, and I know I can't undo what I've done. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when I was stealing from you." "I know, sweetheart. And I never stopped loving you either. Will you wait for me? Will you still be here when I get out?" "Sophia, I'll be here as long as I'm breathing. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." The next 18 months were among the most difficult of my life. Sophia was incarcerated at a federal prison about 3 hours from my home, and I visited her every 2 weeks. At first, our conversations were strained and painful, filled with apologies and recriminations and attempts to understand how our relationship had deteriorated so badly. But gradually, something began to change. Away from Ryan's influence, Sophia started to remember who she had been before she met him. She enrolled in educational programs, participated in therapy sessions, and began working with other inmates who had been victims of domestic abuse and manipulation. "I'm learning that what Ryan did to me has a name," she told me during one visit. "It's called coercive control, and it's a recognized form of domestic abuse. The counselors here are helping me understand how he was able to manipulate me so completely." She also began working on a legal project to help other women who had been coerced into criminal activity by abusive partners. Even from prison, she was researching cases, writing briefs, and advocating for legal reforms that would better protect victims of intimate partner abuse. "I can't undo what I did to you, Mom," she said during one of our visits. "But maybe I can help prevent other families from going through what we went through." Meanwhile, the FBI's investigation into Ryan's criminal network had expanded far beyond our case. They'd identified 12 additional victims across 6 states, with total losses exceeding $2.3 million. Ryan's systematic approach to financial fraud had made him one of the most prolific elder abuse criminals the Bureau had ever encountered. The investigation also led to the recovery of significant assets. The FBI was able to seize Ryan's bank accounts, liquidate his expensive possessions, and recover over $400,000 of the money he'd stolen from various victims. While it wasn't everything, it was enough to restore most of my retirement savings and help me rebuild my financial security. More importantly, the case led to new federal legislation specifically targeting financial fraud committed through intimate partner coercion. The law, known as the Family Financial Protection Act, created enhanced penalties for criminals who manipulate romantic partners into committing financial crimes against family members. Sophia was released after serving 22 months of her sentence. I was waiting for her outside the prison gates, and when she saw me, she ran into my arms and sobbed like the little girl she'd once been. "Mom, I can't believe you're really here. Where else would I be?" The transition back to civilian life wasn't easy for either of us. Sophia had lost her law license and would need to find a new career. She'd also lost most of her possessions, her savings, and her confidence in her own judgment. But she was free from Ryan's influence, clear-headed about what had happened to her, and determined to rebuild her life on honest foundations. She moved into a small apartment near my house and took a job as a paralegal at a nonprofit organization that provided legal services to domestic abuse victims. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply meaningful to her, and she threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd once brought to corporate law. "Every case reminds me of my own situation," she told me one evening over dinner at my Thai house. "These women have been manipulated and coerced and convinced that they're responsible for their abuser's crimes. I can help them understand that being a victim doesn't make you guilty, and that it's possible to rebuild your life after someone destroys it." 6 months after her release, Sophia met someone new. Michael was a social worker who specialized in helping formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society. He knew about her criminal history, understood the circumstances that had led to her imprisonment, and wasn't intimidated by her past. "I was worried about introducing him to you," she confessed, before bringing him to dinner at my house. "I thought you might be suspicious of anyone I was dating after what happened with Ryan. Sophia, I trust your judgment now in a way that I couldn't when you were with Ryan. You've learned to recognize manipulation and abuse, and you've demonstrated that you're committed to living honestly. If you think Michael is a good man, then I'm sure he is." Michael was indeed a good man, kind, steady, and genuinely devoted to Sophia without trying to control or change her. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than the intense, overwhelming passion that had characterized her relationship with Ryan. Today, 3 years after her release from prison, Sophia is thriving in ways I never expected. She's become a recognized advocate for criminal justice reform, particularly around issues of intimate partner coercion. She speaks at conferences, consults with law enforcement agencies, and has helped dozens of women understand their rights when they've been manipulated into criminal activity. She and Michael are engaged to be married next spring. It will be a small ceremony, very different from the elaborate wedding she had with Ryan. This time, there will be no pretense, no performance, no attempt to impress anyone. Just two people who love each other honestly, surrounded by the people who matter most to them. "Mom," she said to me recently, "I know this sounds strange, but I'm almost grateful for what happened with Ryan." "How can you say that?" "Because it taught me the difference between real love and manipulation. It showed me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. And it gave me a purpose that I never would have found otherwise. I'm helping people who are going through exactly what I went through, and I can offer them something that most advocates can't, the knowledge that comes from having been there myself." Ryan, meanwhile, is still in federal prison, where he's expected to remain for at least 5 more years. According to reports from the Bureau of Prisons, he's been a model prisoner, participating in educational programs and working in the prison library. He's also been providing information about other financial fraud schemes, apparently in hopes of earning additional sentence reductions. But the most important outcome of this entire ordeal has been the healing of my relationship with Sophia. We're closer now than we've ever been, bound together not just by blood, but by shared trauma and mutual forgiveness. She understands that I had to report her crimes because I loved her too much to let her destroy her life protecting a criminal. And I understand that her participation in those crimes came from a place of love and loyalty that was ruthlessly exploited by someone who understood exactly how to manipulate those feelings. "Mom," she said to me on the anniversary of her arrest, "thank you for choosing justice over enabling. If you had just covered for me and tried to protect me from the consequences, I never would have gotten free from Ryan's influence. I never would have learned to trust my own judgment again. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, I told her. But I knew that real love sometimes means letting someone you care about face the consequences of their actions, even when those consequences are painful. Especially when those consequences are painful, she corrected. That's when love matters most. This story isn't just about financial fraud or family betrayal or criminal justice. It's about the difference between love and enabling, between protecting someone and controlling them, between helping someone and making excuses for them. When your child makes a mistake, even a terrible criminal mistake, your job as a parent isn't to shield them from the consequences or to pretend that wrong is right. Your job is to love them enough to insist that they face the truth about their actions and work to make things right. That's what real love looks like. That's what real family does for each other. If you're facing a similar situation with a family member who's involved in criminal activity, remember that you can love someone without protecting them from justice. You can support someone without enabling their destructive behavior. And you can maintain your relationship with someone while still insisting that they take responsibility for their actions. The hardest lesson I learned from this experience is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to rescue them from the consequences of their choices. Sophia needed to face the full weight of what she had done, not just to me, but to herself. She needed to understand that her actions had consequences, that her choices mattered, that she was responsible for rebuilding the trust she had broken. But she also needed to know that facing those consequences didn't mean facing them alone. Throughout her investigation, trial, imprisonment, and rehabilitation, I was there, not to make excuses for her or to minimize her crimes, but to remind her that she was still my daughter and that I still believed in her capacity for redemption. Today, when I look at Sophia, I see the woman I always hoped she would become: strong, honest, compassionate, and committed to using her experiences to help others. She paid a terrible price for her mistakes, but she used that payment to purchase wisdom, integrity, and purpose. And our relationship, while scarred by what we went through, is also stronger than it ever was before. We survived the worst thing that could happen between a parent and child: betrayal, crime, and justice. And we emerged with our love intact and our respect for each other restored. That's the power of real love. It can survive anything, even the truth. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, if it helped you understand something about love or family or justice that you hadn't understood before, please share it with others who might need to hear it. And if you're struggling with a similar situation in your own family, remember that you're not alone, that there are resources available to help you, and that choosing justice over enabling isn't a betrayal of love. It's the highest expression of love possible, because real love doesn't protect people from the truth. Real love helps them face the truth and grow stronger because of it.